In 1984, the United States government did something it had never done before and has never done since. It took the most powerful company in American history, a monopoly that owned the phone on nearly every kitchen counter in the country, and smashed it into 7 pieces. One of those pieces was supposed to be Roadkill, a regional phone company. Boring, local, forgettable. Nobody inside the old empire lost a single minute of sleep over it. 40 years later, that discarded fragment is worth more than the company it was cut from. It stole the empire's most famous customer. It turned a 4-word question into a weapon, and it watched the empire spend $200 billion destroying itself. The fragment's name is Verizon. The empire's name was AT&T. This is the story of how a broken off shard of a monopoly came back and killed the thing that built it. Not with better technology, not with a bigger war chest, but with the one weapon AT&T forgot it ever had: the network itself. For nearly a century, that empire controlled how America communicated. The wires, the phones, the research that invented the future. They called it Ma Bell. And most people thought the breakup was the end of its story. It wasn't. It was the beginning. Before the breakup, AT&T wasn't a company. It was a country. It ran the largest, most advanced communications network on Earth. Over 1 million employees, the wires into nearly every home, the phone on nearly every counter. If you wanted to make a call in America, you went through AT&T. There was no alternative. There was no competitor. The government didn't just allow the monopoly, it enforced it. AT&T was a natural monopoly, a public utility too critical to dismantle, and it used that protection to build something extraordinary. Bell Labs, 9 Nobel Prizes, the transistor, the laser, information theory. AT&T didn't just own the telephone, it owned the future. And that was the problem. When you own the future, you stop protecting the present. In 1974, the Department of Justice filed an antitrust suit against AT&T for using its monopoly in local phone service to crush competition everywhere else. The case took 8 years. On January 8, 1982, AT&T agreed to something no company had ever done. It would break itself apart. The split finalized on January 1st, 1984. AT&T's local operations became 7 independent companies. The Baby Bells. Each got a territory, a slice of the infrastructure, a piece of the customers. AT&T kept long distance. It kept Bell Labs, but it lost the wires. It lost the homes. It lost the one thing that made it a monopoly: direct access to every customer in America. The empire was dismembered, the pieces scattered. What nobody realized was that the pieces were alive, and one of them was learning. Here's the part most people forget. The Baby Bells weren't supposed to survive. Regional utilities, small, fragmented. The assumption was that AT&T would dominate long distance while they fought over local service forever. That assumption was wrong. One Baby Bell, Bell Atlantic, controlled the mid-Atlantic corridor: New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, the densest, most lucrative telecom market in the country. Another company, GTE, ran phone lines across rural and suburban America, not glamorous, but sprawling. In 1998, Bell Atlantic and GTE announced a merger. It closed in 2000. The new entity was renamed Verizon, Veritas, Latin for truth, plus horizon, a name that carried none of the weight of a monopoly or the shame of a breakup. This wasn't a baby bell growing up. This was a weapon being forged, and its first target was the empire that built the forge. Verizon's first move wasn't a product. It wasn't a price cut. It was a promise: the network. While AT&T chased long-distance revenue, Verizon poured billions into the thing that actually mattered, the physical infrastructure connecting phones to towers. Then, it weaponized it. In 2002, a man in a gray jacket started walking through impossible places, forests, tunnels, deserts, holding a phone to his ear and asking one question: "Can you hear me now?" It wasn't a slogan. It was a surgical strike. Every time an AT&T customer dropped a call, they heard that voice. Every time a signal died in an elevator, they pictured that man standing somewhere AT&T couldn't reach. Verizon never claimed to be cheaper. It claimed to be reliable. And reliability was the one thing AT&T had stopped guaranteeing. That was the positioning kill shot. But Verizon's smartest move of the decade wasn't this campaign. It was the deal it was about to walk away from. A decision that looked like the dumbest mistake in tech history, until it wasn't. In 2005, Steve Jobs came to Verizon with a prototype, a phone with no buttons, no keyboard, just a glass screen and a full browser. A device that would do to the phone what the iPod had done to music. Verizon said no. The reason was control. Verizon didn't want to hand Apple authority over the customer, the software, the experience. Its entire identity was built on owning the network and everything that ran on it. Sharing that with a computer company from Cupertino was unacceptable. AT&T said yes. AT&T signed an exclusive deal. The iPhone launched in June 2007 on AT&T's network and AT&T's network only. For 4 years, if you wanted an iPhone in America, you needed AT&T. It looked like a masterstroke. Millions switched carriers just to hold one, but the iPhone wasn't a gift. It was a weapon, and it was pointed straight at AT&T's infrastructure. The iPhone exposed everything. AT&T's network was built for voice calls and BlackBerry email. It was not built for millions of people streaming video, loading full web pages, and downloading apps around the clock. The strain was immediate and catastrophic. Dropped calls became cultural shorthand for AT&T, New York, San Francisco, Austin. The cities with the most iPhones became dead zones. A website called AT&T Drops Your Calls went viral. The empire that invented the telecom industry couldn't keep a phone call connected. AT&T had the most coveted device on Earth, and it was destroying the one thing it needed to keep it, a working network. The golden handcuffs were tightening, and here's where it gets strange. The company that lost the iPhone was about to use it as a murder weapon, and it had nothing to do with phones at all. Verizon didn't wait for the iPhone. In November 2009, Verizon and Motorola launched the Droid, a phone built to do everything the iPhone couldn't. A real keyboard, an open app store, turn-by-turn navigation, a camera with a flash. But the phone wasn't the weapon. The marketing was. Verizon launched a campaign called I Don't. A white screen, black text, a clinical list of everything the iPhone couldn't do. I don't have a real keyboard. I don't run simultaneous apps. I don't take night shots. Droid does. It was a public execution. Verizon never attacked AT&T by name. It attacked the device destroying AT&T's network, and by proxy, AT&T's whole identity as the carrier of the future. The message was surgical. You bought the iPhone because it was the future. But the future doesn't work on AT&T's network. Verizon sold 1 million Droids in 74 days. The iPhone's invincibility was punctured, and AT&T had made a mistake it couldn't buy its way out of. February 10th, 2011. The iPhone arrives on Verizon. For 4 years, AT&T had clung to exclusivity as a moat. Now the moat was gone. Every customer who had endured dropped calls and dead zones now had an alternative. The same phone on the network that actually worked. Analysts predicted an exodus. But AT&T didn't try to fix the network. It tried to buy a solution. In March 2011, AT&T announced a $39 billion acquisition of T-Mobile. The logic was simple. If you can't outbuild the competition, absorb it. Overnight, AT&T would become the largest wireless carrier in America. 4 months later, the Department of Justice blocked it. The same government that broke AT&T up in 1984 now stopped it from reassembling. The deal collapsed that December, and AT&T paid T-Mobile a $4 billion breakup fee for nothing. The empire couldn't expand, it couldn't outbuild, and it still had one move left. A $200 billion bet that the way to survive losing a phone was to stop being a phone company entirely. It was the worst decision the empire ever made. This is where the two companies split. Not in strategy, in philosophy. Verizon invested billions in fiber, Fios, a 100% fiber optic network running straight into homes. Expensive, slow to deploy, unglamorous, and exactly right. AT&T acquired. In 2015, it bought DirecTV for $48.5 billion, a satellite TV company in the middle of a cord-cutting revolution. In 2018, it bought Time Warner for $85 billion. CNN, HBO, Warner Brothers. The logic was vertical integration, own the network, own the content, control the whole experience, the same instinct that built the Bell system, own everything, monopoly as strategy. But the world had changed. The monopoly was gone, and the debt was catastrophic. Over $200 billion to build an empire that didn't fit together. Verizon was building fiber, AT&T was buying Hollywood. The empire was repeating its own history, and history was about to repeat its verdict. In 2021, AT&T spun off DirecTV. The provider it had bought for $48.5 billion was now worth a fraction of that. The write-down was brutal. In 2022, AT&T unwound the Time Warner deal. Warner Media was merged with Discovery in a $43 billion transaction. AT&T had paid $85 billion for those assets 4 years earlier. It walked away with a fraction of its money and a mountain of debt. The numbers tell the story. AT&T spent over $200 billion on DirecTV, Time Warner, and assorted media assets in 7 years. It unwound most of them in 5. The Bell system took 100 years to build. AT&T's media empire took 7 years to assemble and 5 to dismantle. That was the kill shot. Not delivered by Verizon, not by the government. Delivered by the same instinct that made AT&T great, the compulsion to own everything it touched. The empire didn't fall because it was attacked, it fell because it couldn't stop eating. The lesson isn't that acquisitions are bad or that big companies are evil, it's this. AT&T and Verizon were born from the same body, same DNA, same infrastructure. But they made opposite bets. Verizon bet on the network, the unglamorous, expensive, decades-long investment in the physical thing that connects people to each other. AT&T bet on the empire, buying content, buying scale it could never integrate. Verizon won. Not because it was smarter, because it understood what it was. A network, not a media company. A network. The moment you start winning is the moment you get arrogant. The moment you own everything is the moment you stop protecting the one thing that made you worth owning. AT&T forgot what it was. Verizon never did, and the only real question left is, which one are you going to be? And if you want more insane stories about business and history, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. You don't want to miss our next video. Thanks for watching.